um, with some more engagement and opportunities for questions. But if at any time you need to get up or take a break or go to the bathroom, feel free to do so. So with that, I will do a quick introduction about myself. So my name is Annie Lee. I am a research associate at Wilder Research. We are a part of the Wilder Foundation, which is a direct social service organization. And they do a lot of community service outreach as well. Within Wilder Research, I work for Minnesota Compass, and we are a social science, we are a social website. And I'll get a little bit more into that into the presentation. I have a brief agenda for us today, and I just want to make sure that everyone can see my screen. Is it? You see an introduction slide? Wonderful. All right, so introductions. So we did some icebreakers in the chat, but if you haven't had an opportunity to yet, put your name, where you're joining us from today, and a reason of why you volunteer. I'm going to go over a little bit more about what Minnesota Compass does, and then we'll dive into a lot of this data. So we have state and metro area data for you all, and then also some VEAP service specific area data. And then we'll talk a little bit more about, what does this data mean for VEAP and its volunteers. I will do a demonstration of what we call our Build Your Own Profile tool, which is a really exciting tool for anyone who wants to engage more in the data and more around their community data. We'll provide some additional resources and then leave some room for wrap up and discussion. How does that sound to everyone? Wonderful. And all disclosure, I can only see a few of your faces at the bottom here, but if there are any other issues, feel free to let me know in the chat. All right, so like I said before, Minnesota Compass is a social indicators project. Our aim is to build strong communities, and we do this by understanding trends, especially in the data, and to be able to plan for them.
I think you may have muted yourself.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ray. All right, so I'll start this slide again. So our aim is to build strong communities, and we do this by understanding trends, especially in the data, and how to plan for them, and making sure that other people know and understand what the trends mean for them and their communities. We make sure that we have representation from all parts of our state. So originally, Minnesota Compass started out as Twin Cities Compass with a focus on the Twin Cities metro region. But we heard that our data was useful for all parts of the state, and so we expanded what Minnesota Compass is, so that is what Minnesota Compass is today. And we especially take great pride in learning from greater Minnesota as well. We know a lot of organizations and people are concentrated in the Twin Cities metro, but we have Minnesotans from all across the state, and so we want to make sure that their voices are heard as well. We help shape policies for the greatest reach and impact. And we do this a lot through data, engaging in community organizations, as well as work to help organizations understand the data as well, and maintaining an informed public. All right, and how do we do all of this? It's a huge task. So we provide unbiased and credible information, mainly through our Minnesota Compass website. We track trends and measure progress on issues in Minnesota's communities that impact our shared quality of life. So we have a number of quality of life indicators, and I'll kind of dive a little bit more into what that means and how we can kind of use those to better understand our communities and shape policies. We also strive to have a good understanding of what disparities look like. So when we can, we include trend data by race, age, gender, and income. And then additionally, we provide additional resources for addressing issues. So we know that we are a great repository of data, but also we can't have it all. And no one wants to look at it all at our website. And so we're able to point people where they can find more resources that are more pointed to their issues. And we are able to do that through our website as well. Minnesota Compass is funded and supported by a number of foundations across Minnesota. So we have a lot of foundations and organizations that see the value in what we do and fund us in our work here. So a quick shout out to these organizations here. I will pause for a quick second. Are there any questions about Wilder Foundation or research or Minnesota Compass at all? All right, great. I'm going to start moving into the Minnesota and Metro Trends presentation. Not seeing anything in the chat either. So who lives in Minnesota? So in Minnesota, we have 5.6 million people. We see a concentration of more than half, so about 55% of Minnesotans live in the Twin Cities 7-county metro region. And about 45% live outside of that. Currently, we have, or we will see by 2030, 1.3 million Minnesotans who are going to be older Minnesotans, so age 65 and older. This is projected to increase currently by nearly 400,000 people to 1.3 million. Or what will be about a fifth of the state population in 2030. We also see a number of growing residents of color. So currently, residents of color make up about 1/5 or 21% of Minnesota's total population. We see this gap in age though. So we see that our youngest residents, about nearly 1/3 of them are residents of color. Compared to our older population, age 65 and older, we only see about 6% of them who identify as residents of color. All right. So with that, I couldn't get the poll to work, but if we could, either in the comments or if anyone wants to take themselves off mic, I have a little bit of a poll here. So our largest share of our population is currently, is it young children? Is it school-age children? Is it working age adults? Or is it older adults, age 65 and older? So feel free to provide your answer in the chat or take yourself off mic and say your guess. All right, I'm seeing a few working age adults, school age children. One answer for 65 and older. Working age adults. All right, and older adults. All right, and so if you said working age adults, you are correct. I think this person is supposed to be bolded a little bit more, but if you can't, this is the correct answer. And mainly because this is the largest age group here, 18 to 64-year-olds comprise a lot of our population. So it's a little bit of a trick question, but I'll let you make it up. Oh, there we go. That's how you bold it. So maybe can you guess the second largest share of our population, knowing that working age adults make up the greatest share right now? So same deal, if you can put your response in the chat or feel free to take yourself off mic. All right, 5 to 17 school-age children. Older adults. All right, so I'm kind of seeing like half and half here, some split responses for school-age children and older adults. So if you guess school-age children, you are correct. Oh, sorry. They make up the second largest share of our population right now. But that's not going to be the case forever. We see a lot of aging adults, and that's going to be kind of a theme throughout this presentation. So in 2020, we had 51 counties in Minnesota where at least 20% of the residents were age 65 and older. In 2033, we see that the number of counties is going to be growing. We see 76 counties, or at least 20% of the residents are going to be age 65 and older. And if we even project this further out, by 2053, we see 62 counties where a good portion of the population is going to be older adults, age 65 and older. For many communities, there are opportunities and challenges that come with larger shares of older adults in their community. Opportunities are that healthy older adults are available to support their community, whether it's working longer, volunteering, or caring for grandkids. But there's also challenges, such as there might be a drag in the workforce with fewer available working age adults. Older adults will also eventually require healthcare and social services that may tax communities that are not prepared for a larger number of older adults. And so with this, we'll get to some of the metro area data. So this theme of in the Twin Cities metro region, we are both getting older and our economy and workforce is becoming more diverse, especially among our youth population. And we see this here. So when we looked at that first poll here, so largest share of our population is this working age adults, so 18 to 64. We see this pink line here, the second highest, is the school age children, age 5 to 17. And then we see this blue line here. I'm sorry if it's a little small on your screens, the 65 and older population. And what you see is that soon this older adult population is going to overtake the 5 to 17-year-old population in population size, and it's going to continue growing as well. And you see this especially for people of color as well. So this age 65 and older, we talked about how a smaller share of them are people of color, and our younger children under 19 are more likely to be people of color. And this is specific to the Twin Cities region. When we look at nativity, children, more than 1 in 5 children in the Twin Cities metro has at least one foreign-born parent. And this has a lot of implications as well. And we'll kind of dig into that a little bit later. But you know, it's a good chunk of our population is children born to foreign-born parents. All right. So in addition to tracking population and race, we have a number of quality of life indicators that we look at on Minnesota Compass as well. So topics such as arts and culture, civic engagement. So this is a good, how many people are volunteers or how many people volunteer in their free time falls under this category. We have topics on economy, education, environment, health, housing, public safety, transportation, and workforce. We have a number of these topics that also intersect with other topics as well. So this is not entirely exclusive list of what we offer on Minnesota Compass, but we also provide a lot of insights and analysis on our data. So we do data updates and analysis pretty often. Whenever we get new data published, we're able to update that on our website. We also produce what we call insights articles. So data that comes out, we can kind of share a story, a relevant story, either to a community or the statewide community around what this changing data means for our community. We also produce podcasts from time to time. We do stories as well as story maps. And those are a really great way to engage people in the data and having people play around with the data and making sense of it themselves. And then on our social media site, I know our coordinator loves to put out Compass quizzes. So it challenges folks to go in and explore the data a little bit more. On our website, we also offer a number of events and webinars and make those available to the public. We also have a number of special projects that we've been working on the last couple of years. So we have a couple of directories. So one is the Racial Equity Resource Directory. So a number of organizations who are doing work in this area, we have a directory for them, and you're able to sort and filter for any topics or any special requests and get an organization that will help your organization or you personally do that work. And then we also have a leadership directory program. And this is a nationwide program that scans for leadership programs to help people, especially people of color, be more active in leadership and leadership roles. And with that, that's a broad overview of Minnesota Compass and what we offer, as well as a little dive into the statewide data that we offer and the metro area data. With that, I will pause for questions here.
There's a question in the chat, Annie. I'm not sure if you got a chance to see it, but where do you gather the information from?
That's a good question. Thanks, Emily. So our data largely comes from the American Community Survey, which is a product of the census. And so we're able to get really good estimates to a pretty fine geography around those. We also get a lot of information from the state. So Minnesota DEED, we get information from DHS. We also incorporate a lot of economic data from DEED, as well as different US bureaus, and a lot of housing data from HUD. Yeah, that's a good question. So what stats do you have on volunteerism in Minnesota? And so I will have to double check, but I believe it's, what percentage of people are volunteering in Minnesota. And I think we can get that often by age and race as well. There's a question from Helen. Do you have any data about people leaving or moving to Minnesota? And we do. We have an indicator that looks at migration and looks at, whether people have lived in the same place that they did last year. And so is that within the state? Is that from another state? And we're able to look at that from year to year. And so we can get a good idea of whether people are leaving or moving out of Minnesota or into Minnesota as well. Any other questions right now?
Yes. Maybe this was described in the beginning. If it did, it kind of went past me. Mm-hmm. What exactly is the relationship between Minnesota Compass and the Wilder Foundation?
That's a good question. So Minnesota Compass is a project of Wilder Research. Wilder Research is a social science research organization, and we help other organizations with research questions, evaluations of their programs, conduct focus groups. And so this is a project based within that, and we are housed within the Wilder Foundation. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, although one other thing I was wondering on top of that, about how long have you been operating, doing this work? And not you specifically, obviously the group itself.
Yeah, so Wilder Research has been around for more than 100 years. Minnesota Compass, I believe, has been around for about 15 years.
Excuse me.
Yeah, so we've done a lot of work within the community and our shareholders to get a good sense of, how can we best present data that is important to users. Thanks for that question. I have another question here. So does someone online know how VEAP has used the data and actions they've considered in response? I'm not sure if someone from VEAP wants to take that question, or if maybe that's something that we want to share at the end.
Yeah, this is Courtney. I'm not sure if I understand the question, but would be happy to address any questions about VEAP data. I'm not sure specifically what Dorette's referring to. So Dorette, if you want to add another question in the chat, maybe we can circle back to that later on.
Thanks, Courtney. All right, well, if there aren't any other questions, I'm going to move a little into the VEAP data that I have here. I'm muted. I apologize, I was on mute. So from my understanding, VEAP is an organization that provides both food and basic needs, as well as a number of social services for clients. So I'll kind of be framing my data presentation around the services that you provide, as well as this service area here. And this encompasses the Bloomington, Edina, Richfield, and parts of South Minneapolis here. And so when I talk about the data, most of the time it will be specific to the service area, so where your clients are coming in from. And also based on the 2020 data that I was given, it looks like about 92% of your participants are from these areas. For the rest of the 8%, it's a combination of folks coming in from Fort Snelling, also those who may not have an address, those due to experiencing homelessness, or maybe they're coming from outside of the main service area. But that being said, a lot of the following data is going to be about the clients who live in this service area here. So I'll be going a little bit into the tool in a bit, but from that you can generate a profile specific to this geography here. And we have a number of topics that have indicators underneath them. I think for the purposes of this presentation, I'll be going through about half of them. So those include race and ethnicity, language, nativity, so where people are born, income and poverty, housing, and transportation and workforce. How does that sound? Great. All right, so I'll dive into the data here. So when we look at the service area here, we have about a majority are white, about 1 in 5 are people of color, and you can see the different breakdowns for race and ethnicity underneath that. In your data, more than 20,000 people of color visited your pantry, which made up about 70% of the total visits. All right, looking at language here, about 1 in 6 residents in this area speak a language other than English. About 1 in 20 speak English less than very well. So there are non-English speakers in your service population, and that has a few implications as well. So what does outreach currently look like? How are staff and volunteers helping non-English speakers through your services? So just these are questions that I think of when I look at the data. Income and poverty, we see that this is a pretty wealthy service area here. This area has more wealth compared to the rest of the state. The median household income is above the state median income of $74,000. And we see that the median household income for this area is about $87,000. And this might be because we're capturing geographies that have pretty high incomes, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it is representative of other parts of different counties here, different cities, sorry. When we look at income and when we look at the poverty portion, we have about 7% of people who have incomes that fall below poverty. And with some of the measures we're able to do, we're able to see some of the data with certain crosstabs. So when we look at age by poverty status, we see that a slightly greater share of older adults have an income that fall below the poverty line compared to all other age groups. So when we look at the age 65 and older, we see that about 6% of the population has an income below poverty. And it's slightly lower for other age groups here. When we look at the Twin Cities region, and so this is not specific to the service area here, but a little bit more broader in the Twin Cities metro, we see that Black and American Indian residents are more likely to have an income that falls below poverty compared to all of the other race and ethnicity categories. When we look at housing, we tend to look at cost burden households. So we define that as households who are paying more than 30% of their income for housing. So when that happens, there's a lot less income to spend on other services or needs of the family. So this is a really important indicator that we look at. So in the service population area, we have about 27% of the population. 27% of the population of households who are cost burdened. So they're about 1 in 4 households are paying too much for housing here. And we look at the Twin Cities region. So we have about the same in the Twin Cities region, but this is, obviously different for different races and ethnicities. We see that American Indian and Black and those of other races are also paying a lot more for housing. A greater share of these populations are paying way too much for housing compared to other races and ethnicities. Transportation is also a really important indicator, especially for accessing services and other needs. We see that about 7% of the service area has no access to a vehicle. So questions that come up for me are, how frequently are people able to access your food pantry? At what frequency are they able to get services, and are there assistances available? I know that you have a mobile food pantry as well as some transportation assistance. And I was shared that, there's a lot of great work that's been done to increase transportation and reduce that as a barrier within your organization. I don't know if anybody else from VEAP wants to add in a little bit more about that.
I can add a little bit. So I spoke with our transportation manager, and he gave me some information. I know many of you are familiar with our mobile pantry and with, our home delivery service out of the pantry. But to give you some background in how we're helping people with transportation, when transportation services were initially started at VEAP, we used a grant, and these services were limited to the city of Bloomington. The sites were originally determined by looking at free and reduced lunches in schools, but eventually that program really expanded. So after the first few sites were established and relationships began to be formed, VEAP really started getting a lot of requests to partner with other community sites. Eventually we expanded out. So now we wanted to try and have mobile sites in each part of our service area. And right now we actually have the most mobile sites we've ever had, which is about 10 total sites. And that goes a long way in helping address some of these issues with people who don't have vehicles available to come get food. As many of you know as well, we also do home deliveries. So we used to offer people rides home if they maybe came to VEAP using public transportation, but then couldn't get their groceries home on public transportation. But now, because of the pandemic, we've transitioned to doing a lot of home deliveries. So just some stats, in 2021, we completed 3,500 home deliveries. We did 135 mobile site distributions, and we gave out 125,330 pounds of food through mobile deliveries, through mobile sites and through home deliveries. And we served over 5,000 households. So those are some specific examples of how VEAP uses our services to address these issues in the community.
Thanks for sharing that, Emily. I think that's wonderful. All right, and then the next portion and the last piece. Sorry, I thought someone had taken themselves off mic. The last portion of this data is looking at workforce. So what does the workforce that lives in the service area look like? Well, a lot of people are working. We see that about 85% of the service area is employed. And we see that this is also a very well-educated area. So we see that about 95% of the residents that live in this area are high school graduates or higher. And so maybe that challenges a little bit about perceptions about who needs services and who is actually coming in and getting services. And so a little discussion here about what all this data can mean for VEAP and VEAP volunteers. So in the data, we learned that more residents are expected to be aging. We will see a growing population of older adults. We will see a number of younger children and our workforce becoming more diverse. There will be more residents of color. We have a growing number of foreign-born residents, people who are moving from other countries and seeing the implications of that. So a lot of, we saw that there was a good statistic around the number of children born to foreign-born parents. There's a number of residents who are also non-English speaking, as well as looking at the income and education levels of residents in this area here. We saw highly educated. We have a number of residents who are who have a high median income, but we also saw a portion of residents who don't have access to a lot of income and the poverty rate as well. So considerations around who your clients are. So maybe you had some perceptions around, like who uses food pantries, who needs services, and why, maybe questioning why you have perceptions like that. But then also, how can we best position ourselves as volunteers to serve people who have yet to come into VEAP, or how can we create an environment that invites people and people feel welcome to use these services? Does anybody else have any immediate reactions to this data? Maybe something that surprised you or things that you didn't know, or? All right, I'm not seeing anything in the chat right now, which makes me think that I can move on to the next portion. I know we're running a little low on time, but I do want to share a little bit about how I got this data. Also uses, maybe you don't have a specific geography like VEAP service area that you're interested in, but maybe there's another geography that you're interested in. So maybe even around your own neighborhood or maybe school district. So with that, I'm going to exit and go to Minnesota Compass's website. Can everyone see the build your own profile here? Perfect. All right. So this is Minnesota Compass's website. We had a new rebranding last year, so I'm really excited that it's really new and fresh and inviting. So how you get to this is under Insights and Analysis. Oh, I'm sorry, Explore the Data. You will go to build your own custom profile. And so with this, you can pick a geography that you either define or that is already pre-selected, and you can get a data profile that looks similar to the one that I had presented today. So we like to think of the build your own profile as kind of a build your own adventure story. So there's 3 options here that you can see. So we either have the build option, and you have different geography levels that you can get a better glimpse at. So we have statewide, we have Twin Cities, and we also have Duluth area geographies that you're able to choose from. So with that, is there a geography that anyone is really interested in right now? I know we looked at parts of VEAP service area, but if there's another geography that people are particularly interested in, maybe somewhere where people are from, or maybe you work in another county, we can also look at zip code level data.
How exactly will this data be presented? I mean, will it be designating parts of the state? Could you maybe demonstrate by age,
Yeah, that is a
racial background?
That's a great suggestion. So I will, so I'm in Ramsey County, so I'm going to demonstrate this county here. So you can pick one, you can pick a number of counties, and what it will do is it sends your selection to what we call an API, and it kind of pulls all of the data for that and presents it into a profile here. So with that, we'll view the profile, and it gives you your selection of where you're looking at. You can also bookmark or share this profile, but it will pull up a profile of, it will collapse all these rows so that you can look at the different topic areas that you can get more information on. So if I were interested in, you know, how many people are living in Ramsey County that lived here last year. So we see that about 82% of the population lived in Ramsey County last year as well. So that kind of gets at a question earlier about when we can see migration, how many people are moving in from a different place in the US, or how many people are migrating from outside of the US. And so with this tool, you can look at different counties, but then you can also look at specific zip codes and even school districts, census tracts, which gets at an even finer geography. Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. I was just, it took me a while to notice because I didn't see I thought there was going to be more visual graphics on the map.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so we don't have a lot of visual graphs on
That's
the
okay.
build your own profile, but you are able to
That's
see
okay.
this. Yeah, but we do have more visualizations on the Compass website as well. I have a question here on which are our poorest counties. And so that's a great question for Minnesota Compass and not necessarily this profile. So I think I might come back to that question at the end if that is okay. I think another interesting feature of this tool is that you're able to compare. And so maybe I was interested in Ramsey County, but then also perhaps neighboring Hennepin County as well. And so you can do a similar thing where you can compare Ramsey County and then select Hennepin County as the second comparison here. And so we will compare, oh, I'm sorry. And so what it does is pulls up a profile that compares Ramsey County to Hennepin County, and you can see data for the same without combining them. And so I'm gonna do that one more time here. And then in comparison group 2, Hennepin County. And so I will compare it here. And so if I had the same question, you know, how many people moved from out of state in these 2 counties? I can go down to residency. And so for folks that moved from outside of Minnesota, but still in the US, we see that Ramsey County had about 17 people who had moved to Ramsey County, and we see that Hennepin County is a little lower with 16% here. And so this is a good way to get data profiles on two different geographies. You don't necessarily have to pick counties, but it can also be census tract or zip code level, and even school districts. And I think my favorite feature of this Build Your Own tool is the straw feature. And so you can pick a reference layer. I'm going to go even finer into census tracts so that you can even look at neighborhood level data. So I'm going to pretend that I live over in New Ulm here. And so I have an option to see all of the zip codes in this area. But say, I'm curious about my neighborhood and my and what demographics look like in my neighborhood. So with the Build Your Own tool, you're able to select a drawing feature here. So I'm going to draw, maybe I live along this route here. And you can essentially pick a shape here. And so maybe this isn't my house, but maybe this is my neighborhood, and this is how I define my neighborhood. And so this gives a lot of organizations the authority to pick and define your own community and what that looks like. And so I will view my profile here, and it might tell me it is a little too small. I think I did get a little ambiguous here. And so at this level, a lot of the data is suppressed, but we can see that the apportionment gave us about 245 people in this population. And we can look at, how many, at a lot of the same indicators, but some of them might be suppressed just for the number of people in that area. I believe our suppression level is a certain threshold. So if we get underneath that threshold amount, we have to suppress it for privacy reasons. So I think that was a question in the chat here. Are there any questions on this tool here? I have found it really useful, especially when I'm curious about a specific geography that maybe I can't get or find data for.
Yeah, I hate to always be the one who's got the most questions. It's been a story of my life sometimes.
No, that's
But
okay. I welcome your
would,
question.
outside of those working for Compass, who would be using this kind of research most often, and how?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we find that a lot of our users are foundations, as well as other nonprofits who maybe have a certain program or service, and they're interested in learning a little bit more about that population who lives in the area or service area. And so kind of similarly, what I did here was pull up a lot of data around, who potentially could our service area reach out to, and what are the needs of that population. And so looking at a lot of the economic factors, a lot of the race and ethnicity, language, a lot of the data who can tell you, whether or not your services are appropriate, or how we can go about changing some of those so that they're more appropriate for the population. Okay, I have a couple of questions that kind of go through exploring Minnesota Compass a little bit. So I might do that at the end here. How does your data compare with the 2020 census data? So we have been using 2020 census data primarily for our population counts right now. And we do have 5-year ACS estimates for 2020, but they are they're not controversial. They're they're a lot smaller response rate than we've seen in previous years. So they're not as reliable, and we are not able to trend those data. And so right now we are using it for primarily for population counts. I don't believe we have any data on gun ownership and criminal records right now. We have a number, as I mentioned earlier, we have a number of quality of life topics here, and I feel like that would fall under public safety. And we are convening 2 separate advisory groups this year to relook at some of these indicators that fall under environment and public safety, and looking at whether or not these are relevant topics or if we should explore other indicators. So those are good suggestions. And then there's a question around, is VEAP currently using the Build Your Own program? I'm not too sure about that, but I think VEAP has reached out to Compass to do this presentation and share some of the trends that we've been seeing. And so I don't know if that's a question that someone from VEAP wants to respond to.
I can tackle that, Courtney, again. So we've had some previous presentations to volunteers and other audiences that helped create around poverty, and we use the Minnesota Compass data quite a bit to look at some of the poverty rates in our service area. So a lot of the data we shared in that presentation was right from this resource. I can share that for our diversity, equity, and inclusion team, we have used some of the data from Minnesota Compass to learn a little bit more about who lives in our community, who's here, kind of who are we seeing here at VEAP in terms of accessing services or volunteering, and who aren't we seeing here as well. So I can say, just in terms of the volunteer department, it's a resource that we definitely use when we're looking to learn a little bit more about our community. I also just want to quickly respond. There was a question about what percentage of Minnesotans volunteer. That was in the chat, and I'm not sure if that's something that's on Minnesota Compass. I can give you a general number. The Corporation for National and Community Service, so they oversee a variety of programs, including the AmeriCorps Vista program that Emily is a part of now. They do an annual survey about volunteerism, and about 35% of Minnesotans formally volunteered. So formally meaning, like many of you are here at VEAP, where you've applied, you have a shift, it's a set way that you're contributing to an organization. However, we do know that there are a lot of people, particularly people of color, who volunteer in other ways that would be considered not as formal. So they're helping out in their community, they're more informally supporting a variety of efforts, but it may not be recognized as a formal volunteer opportunity. So,
and to kind of add on to that too, I don't know what like last year's stats was, but usually Minnesota ranks #1 for the amount of citizens who volunteer. If we're not ranking #1, it's usually Utah. So we kind of battle out with them each year who's #1 for that.
Yeah, thanks. Can everyone still see my screen here?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I just pulled that up, and you're right. It is Utah #1 this in 2019. But then I was able to pull up Twin Cities statistics. So we have about 40% of the population who volunteer their time in the past year. So yeah, I just wanted to share that out, as well as a metro-wide statistic here. And then I know there was a question here around poorest counties. So when we look at household median income, we can find rankings of state or of county geographies. And if we scroll down to the bottom here, so we have a lot of counties that are falling below the $500 or $50,000 household median income per year here. I'm trying to see, I think that might be it. I'm going to go back to my presentation. Apologies, I have to scroll through a few here to get back to where I was. If there are any other questions in the meantime, happy to address those. Otherwise, if you are looking for more data, Minnesota Compass has a lot of other data resources that we can provide. So for example, in housing, we don't necessarily host this on our website, but we're proud to be able to direct you. Perhaps if you're interested in, how many housing construction sites are being worked on this year, there's a great website here that talks about that. If you're interested in what housing segregation looks like, there's a great website that looks at that. And so if you go to any of our topic pages, and you can scroll down and say that, home ownership gap, homelessness, house burden, household don't speak to you. If you're interested in more measures, we always have this more measures button here, and you can look at different data sets and data rich sites that will give you a better picture or more broader picture of other indicators that you would be interested in. All right, and so those are a little bit about other data resources that you can access. VEAP also has a number of other resources for volunteers and events that are coming up. So maybe I'll pass that off to somebody else at VEAP if anybody wants to expand on some of the other resources that are coming up.
Yeah, I can talk about a couple of things. So I'll just call out, so we have a VEAP stats sheet. So if any of you participated in the community coffee hours over the last year, we've shared some statistics and information about social services and the basic needs team. And so we have that information that's available for you if you want to look at some VEAP specific information. We'll include that in the follow-up email to this session. We also have a diversity, equity, and inclusion library now that's located by the phone intake room and is also across from Joe's office. So that has books covering a variety of different topics. Whether you're interested in fiction or nonfiction, you can certainly use that little library to further learn about topics like the ones that we covered today. We also have the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Learning Challenge. So we did the first group of that back in October, but the Learning Challenge resources are always available for you. So in the follow-up email to this session, again, I will include a link to all of those Learning Challenge resources. A lot of those are related to our community demographics and will also help you learn more about the community. And then we also have an upcoming event. So in March, we're hosting Immigration 101, led by the Immigrant Law Center. That will be an introduction to immigration, and it would be a great next step in terms of learning more about the community. This training has been really foundational in understanding the demographic makeup of our community, and we're really hoping that as this year continues, we can continue to build on what we learned today.
Thank you, Emily. And with that, I'll have some closing slides. So for Minnesota Compass, we do have a newsletter if you're interested in data or any of the articles that we write throughout the year. We do have a sign up sheet on the Minnesota Compass website, and I will put that here in the chat. And I apologize, I do not have a slide with my email, but I can be reached at annie.lee@wilder.org. And I will put that in the chat as well. So I know we only have like a minute left, so I'm not sure if I can get to any other questions, but if there are any other questions that come up after this presentation, or I know that you're going into a little bit of a discussion group, if there are any other data questions that I can help answer, feel free to send me an email and I can do the best that I can to answer. With that, I will close out and say thank you so much to VEAP and the volunteer department for having me here today. Thank you to the volunteers and all the work that you do. I heard in the responses in the icebreaker that a lot of people volunteer their time because they want to be a part of their community. They want to give back and help. And so these are all really great reasons. And I'm glad that you all are here and doing this learning process with us today. So with that, I will stop sharing here and hand it back to, I think, is it Emily? Or I'm not sure if, okay, perfect.
Yeah. All right, well, thank you so much, Annie. That was really great information. So now I'll go ahead and stop the recording.